Shane Beaumont, welcome to Property Insights, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Your eyes are a bit red.
I've had 2.5 hours sleep.
You literally were on the red eye.
I got the red eye.
From what I hear, Perth's not suffering like the rest of Australia.
No, not at all. So if you said to me we'd have these, increases of interest rates, you would think that would be the case. But the reality is there's only 7,100 properties on the market in Perth.
At any one time?
At the moment.
Right.
So to give you some idea, GFC, 18,000.
Wow.
Average days got out to sort of basically 80. Average days in Perth now.
80,000?
Average days
Yeah.
was 80 on market. So properties would
80
sit on
80
there,
properties
80,
on.
80 days they'd sit on
Oh,
the market.
sorry. Okay. So that again. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shane. The average number of days a property would be on the market during the GFC was 80 days.
80 days.
So nobody wanted to buy them, basically.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
And stock levels got up to basically 16, 17,000.
At any one time?
Yep.
Wow.
At any given moment.
Wow.
Now it's 7,100. So,
sure.
So very
What do you put that
limited
down
supply. Basically, it hasn't been as much construction take place. So there's not going to be an oversupply, whereas there probably was back in 2014, which is our last mini high. Which was probably back then it was really mining related. The biggest difference I've seen, and I was just saying off air, about 70% of my clients or people buying at the moment are eastern states based, whether it be Melbourne and Sydney. And a lot of people think it's the investor that's got 60 properties. A lot of mum and dads have seen what's happened on the eastern seaboard and think, well, we don't want to miss that opportunity. And the reality is they're paying in many circumstances less than what they were selling for either 2014 or even 2007 in some suburbs. So after all that length of time, the price has only just got back to those two.
Is that right? So it's only just sort of recovered?
It's recovered, yeah. And it's really been on the back of COVID. So again, overnight, really, there was about an 8-week, lag where we thought what's going to happen. And then it just went nuts. And the amount of people that have discovered Perth, whether it be good or bad media, obviously with Mark McGowan and what have you, people now go, you know what, it's only 3.5 hours away. So a lot of young families who simply couldn't afford to live like for like in, say, Sydney or Melbourne. And I'll give you an example. You can get a 1,000 square metre block with some development potential with a 4x2.
What's the 4x2?
4-bedroom, 2-bathroom.
Oh, right, yep.
Family home.
Yep.
You should be within an 8-kilometre radius of the city. You should be able to pick that up for under 600,000. Now, if you said to anyone here, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
In fact, I was speaking to the taxi driver on the way here. And there's a property on our most expensive street in WA is Jutland Parade, one of the most expensive streets. Alan Bond used to live there. There's a property on the market there right now, 1,000 square metres for basically just under 4 mil. Now, if I put that to Sydney, most expensive street, it's not going to be 4 mil.
No, it'd be a lot more than that.
Yeah. So
I used to live in Victoria Road. I used to live in a block of apartments called the Continental. I don't know if it's still there. Mm-hmm. It was like a huge block of apartments, quite tall. By the way, this is in 35 years ago, more, 36, 37 years ago. And Alan Bond's place was in front of me, but he wasn't in Victoria Street. He was in probably Jutland or whatever it is. It was in Dalkeith. I was in Dalkeith. Mm-hmm. I think that's right.
Watkins, I think it is. Watkins Road.
Yeah, and I had a gun view, and I bought that place for 90 grand. Yeah. And I can't remember what I sold it for, but wasn't much more than that. In those days, properties in Perth didn't go up much.
Yeah.
And then with the mining boom, you always got a good rental.
Yeah.
You got a good rental year, but you never had much capital gain.
Yeah.
And you're saying that during the GFC period, Perth suffered quite a lot.
So, and I think that was because it was a one-dimensional market. There was too much in mining, basically.
Too much reliance in mining.
Exactly, yeah, and mining-related industry. Whereas and 2014, I felt that was the same. Right now, I can't remember the last time I sold a property to a person from the eastern seaboard buying in WA because of mining. It's young families, school teachers. I'd go on a limb to say if you're a plumber, right now you'd be earning more money in Perth than what you would in Sydney. So to actually be in a prime location relatively, 8 minutes from the beach, great schools, and if you're willing to make that move, you can do quite well. But a lot of it isn't just the investors. A lot of people are saying, well, I'm never going to move to Perth, but I'm never going to be able to get in the market in Sydney. So even if I get into a $400,000 property and you make 150 and your market stays stagnant, it's probably the only way they're going to catch that deposit to get into the market because the cost of living is so high. So we're seeing a lot of that at the moment.
So in terms of unemployment, is Perth do better than the rest of Australia when it comes to unemployment? In other words, because of the mining industry or whatever it is, whatever industries are now viable over there, does Perth rank as well as the rest of the states when it comes to unemployment?
WA at the moment I would say have the lowest unemployment rate in the country. But again, it's not just that one sector. A lot of people are earning enough money now. Before, the gap between working in the mines and having a normal city job as such, the gap was huge. But as building obviously has got more expensive, demand, the rates have gone up that much. You don't need to necessarily chase that lifestyle because it's a tough lifestyle. Fly in, fly out it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
So if you go from earning 200,000 back to 80 doing the same thing, it's a big gap. But some of these trades now earn a couple $100,000. Some brickies are earning $500,000.
Wow.
Because the demand it's there. It's how long that's sustainable. It was starting to ease a bit now, but it's just a good example of it's not just being focused just on that mining sector, which pretty much everyone, it's all they think about when they think of WA.
Yeah. So you said earlier that a lot of your buyers are coming from the other states.
Yep.
Every state's east of Perth, I guess.
Yep.
But are we talking about New South Wales, Melbourne or Queensland? What are we talking about?
Mainly New South Wales and Victoria. Queensland, we're just starting to see the inquiry come through, and I track numbers pretty well across the country. Their market is cooling, from what I understand. So obviously for them to get into the market, they look for value, and WA is still, I have not seen any buyer sentiment pull back because of interest rates. What they're getting lent is pulling back, but their attitude towards buying, whether it be first home buyers, young families, investors, and I went 3 years without selling to an investor prior to COVID. Like, we just did not get any investor inquiry because the reality was, if you bought in 2013, 2014, you're in negative equity. And I give you an example in Mandurah. There was properties back from 2006. Mandurah's an hour from Perth in the south. Huge growing population. Properties there that went for $3 million on the canals have only just recently been selling for 1.5, 1.8 still.
Wow.
That much long. A lot of that money was super, retirees, got crunched, had to sell, that forced selling. We haven't seen any signs of forced selling. So with that limited stock, great yields. Most of the investors that are looking from over east, they're getting over 6.5% yield.
Rental yield.
Rental yield. So again, I don't live here, but I can imagine for $1 million,
you don't get that.
You're not going to get that.
You get 2.5, 3.
Yeah. And I've got one client, a guy called Michael, hasn't been to Perth, looked at the numbers, took a chance. He's, during COVID, bought 18 properties and conservatively had 35% growth in what he's put in. But there's a group of 4 units, for example, in a working class suburb, a place called Armidale, four 2x1 villas. He's getting $350 each. It owes him $550. He just thinks, well, hang on, that just doesn't work. But he took a chance because obviously now everyone's sort of trying to get in. There's still legs in it, I think, because they're limited supply. Vacancy rates in WA are 0.7%. I'm not sure what they are over here, but
about 1.
Yeah, it's pretty low. So I think there's only about 1,600 properties on the market for lease right now. So
well, that's mad. So you mentioned earlier on, I can't remember if you said 8 minutes or 8 kilometres from the city.
8 Ks.
8 Ks.
8 minutes, yes.
Okay.
Here, 8 Ks. I've just realised can take more than 8 minutes, but...
well, 8 Ks here is nowhere. I mean, it's around 40 Ks here.
Yeah.
So most people want to buy within 40 Ks of the CBD.
Yeah.
But you're saying 8 Ks. Perth's very flat, unless you get up in the hills.
Yeah.
But
relatively flat.
Pretty flat.
Yeah.
And traffic is not too bad. When I was over there recently, I saw a bit of traffic, which is pretty unusual for me. Well, for Perth, I thought, but I saw a bit of traffic. But 8 Ks from the city, so you're saying the desired property, particularly from a rental point of view, if I'm buying, if I'm buying from Sydney, I want to just rent it out, I should be looking at something no more than it was. So let's say 10 Ks from the city, middle CBD.
Well, I think it depends what you're looking at, but when I look at the properties that have done well, I'm not sure again in Sydney, but a lot of people are still chasing a bit of land. Obviously, it's a bit harder here.
Yeah.
So in WA, the areas that I've seen probably the most growth are on the fringes where it hasn't gone high density. So the closer to the city you are, obviously the more built up you are. But a lot of the areas, and an area I sell in is Gosnells, working class suburb, but you're 25 minutes from the city, bit further out, but you've got great schools, infrastructure. You're 12 minutes from the airport, and you can get a large block. So if you do have 2 cars, if you've got kids that want to kick the football, they can still do that. And that's where I think the good thing about these buyers that are buying from over east are seeing that and going, well, that's pretty rare where I live now at that sort of price point. But most of them now, because they're on that fringe where it hasn't been developed, you may get an R30 zoning, which R30 means you can subdivide if you've got 600 square metres. So you're getting a good home now that's getting potentially $400 a week.
So you can put like a second house on
Second house on it, yeah. Yep.
A dual lock.
Yeah. So you can actually put 2 houses on some of these lots, but this is actually to subdivide it and create 2 titles.
So 2 different titles,
Yeah.
okay.
So the most common thing we're selling at the moment, if you look at a corner lot, 3x1,
What's
you're
that mean?
paying
3 bedrooms?
3 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 700 square metres, corner lot, you can retain the house. You'll pick that up for around 400,000. It's getting 450, 470 a week.
Right, so that's more than 5%. It's like, it's about 7% or something like that. That's pretty good yield.
Yeah. And from what I understand, again, speaking a lot of the buyers agency, our rates seem to be a lot less. So average council rates, 1,1700, water rates 900. So when you add those things up and you're expecting a bit of growth, there's an appetite there. Where a lot of the WA buyers, and I say this to first home buyers all the time, you've got a second chance to get into the market. But for so long when it's down, but why would I buy? Rents keep going down, property prices are going down, and then it turns. And who would have thought, when COVID hit, that it would go like it did? But so often you miss that second opportunity, and that's what we're saying a lot of first home buyers. Don't miss out this time, because the rents are not going to be slowing down. So under 400, 500,000, there's a very good chance you're probably going to be paying less in a mortgage, even with these increases.
Then you would if you rent.
With a rent,
I'm quite amazed at the development that's happened in Perth, infrastructure that's happened in Perth over the last few years. I walked down to the river from the city.
Yep.
My God, it's mind-boggling what's happened down there in terms of infrastructure and hotels and restaurants and just things to visit, places to go, walks.
Definitely changed,
it's just ridiculously good.
Yeah.
I don't think people over the east here realise the quality of what you have in Perth. I mean, and I'm not trying to suck up to anybody, but what they've done there in Perth, they've sort of snuck up on us in terms of what they've installed in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think like anything, when they do decide they're going to build a stadium instead of more hospitals and things like that. But now you think of the events that come to Perth, like last week, UFC. For all the negative press about that, the buzz around town was phenomenal.
Oh, I was there.
Yeah.
And it was mental.
Yeah.
After the fight, I just hung around after the fight. I was walking around, just going for a walk.
Yeah.
And every pub was full. People just out having a good time. Having all the restaurants are full. Everything was full. Just people everywhere. It was crazy. And all the hotels are full. You go down to the reception, you meet people there from these states. There's so many people from these states, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I reckon I ran about 25 people I knew.
Yeah.
Literally, blokes I knew, left, right, centre. What are you doing here? The same as you. And Perth, and that arena where it was held, RACV, is it RAC? A great arena. Yeah. So Perth's infrastructure has been improved tremendously. And then, if you go back towards the airport, then you've got the casino. The casino is unbelievable now. I didn't like it that much in the old days.
Yeah.
When it was originally built, but these days it's beautiful, and the service apartments there, apartment buildings there, it's sort of pretty cool.
Yeah.
As I said, Perth has crept up on the rest of the nation in terms of its infrastructure.
Without a doubt.
Airport's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it had to.
Yeah, totally.
The money there, but we sort of just play catch up. But for the backlash that a lot of the governments have received now, that stadium at the time, the uproar was unbelievable.
The RAC stadium,
build it. And people come.
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes a bit of balls, basically, to say, look, let's do it. But no one ever calls back and said, oh, maybe we were wrong. But it's been phenomenal. You just wouldn't have got those events.
Well, I saw the front page of I think it's West Australian, whatever it is the next day, Blood Sport was the front page. But do you reckon anyone could give a damn? Because anyone who buys that newspaper was actually at the fight. So they don't think about it as a blood sport. And if they do, they didn't give a damn. Yeah. And it actually brought so much revenue to the joint. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it was just an outstanding event. There was no drama.
Yeah.
The cops were fantastic. They were there, but you didn't see them.
Yeah.
The crowds were really well behaved.
Yeah.
There might have been a few things, but generally speaking, the crowds are really well behaved. Extraordinarily supportive of all the Australian fighters,
Yeah.
particularly your bloke, the West Australian bloke you had up there, Della something or other. I can't remember.
Yeah.
They went mental. I mean, they're very. By the way, people in Perth are very parochial.
Yeah.
West Australian very parochial.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But they do welcome East State people too. By the way,
I think Australians, they just really want to see do well, especially the underdog. Like, I think when you're coming from, say, sleepy Perth, and you're on the world stage, it's pretty phenomenal. To see these guys.
I've been listening to shows talking about the night, and they're talking about Perth.
Yeah.
And you would never heard that word Perth mentioned before. When we talk about Australia, it's always Sydney and Melbourne. But we're talking about Perth. It was fantastic. So what would you say to anyone from the eastern states who's listening to this, thinking about spreading or diversifying their portfolio? What would you say to them about Perth, investing in Perth?
I believe now, as mentioned earlier, it was just too one-dimensional before. It was just all mining money. But I think when you look at lifestyle, and ultimately people are coming to Perth because of lifestyle. So for the first time in a long time, immigration's going nuts. I can't see that slowing down. And a couple of my friends are in mining, they build the camps. They've already booked up next year's work. So the legs in the mining, we're not really seeing that yet. Lithium and what have you, that's really going to come through. But lifestyle-based things means people want to move there. The price and affordability compared to the eastern states is, well, you can work it out very quickly. Just go on realestate.com or Domain. You'll see. Click on a map and compare like for like, the same sort of property. I'll give you an example. Darlinghurst maybe compared to Subiaco. Terrace home, I see auctions with Tom Panos does them, sometimes mid-twos. That same property in Subiaco, 600, 700 grand.
Yeah, value for money. If you got two to spend, you might as well go and buy three over there.
Yeah, so
and spread your risk.
And you are going to finally, I believe, going to be getting that growth. But there will probably be a bit more stock come to market, as probably after when these people come out of their fixed terms. But because the rents are just keeping up with it, I just haven't seen any forced selling yet. And I deal with a working class suburb a lot. I get to see all suburbs, from a few million to 150 grand. The higher end, we've just seen calm down a bit because obviously interest rates at 2%, the pool of buyers that could afford 2 million is obviously a lot bigger.
Yeah.
But that everyday property, the legs in it are the fact that you've got to live somewhere. You have to live somewhere. And if I'm going to be paying more in rent than what I am to have my own home, why wouldn't I take that opportunity?
Well, and I think what's interesting about this too, Shane, is that if I was $1 million borrower 3 months ago, but now I'm only at $800,000 borrower because my serviceability is lower. All right, I'm not going to buy the $1 million property in Perth. I'm going to go buy the cheap one, but then I'm still going to buy. I mean, and I'm still going to get a good return. My yield's still going to be very good.
You're going to be probably moving 1 to 2 suburbs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's 8 minutes.
You're not going to be in the arse end of West Australia. I mean, you were saying earlier about 8 minutes or 8Ks. You might be 10 minutes and 10Ks.
Yeah,
it's not sort of earth shattering.
Yeah, and I think again, looking at the markets in WA, probably more in Sydney, it may be more based around public transport and what have you, because it's harder to get around. Public transport's pretty underutilised. They're improving it, but it's underutilised because it's so easy to get around.
Yeah.
So why would you? Whether it be Uber, whether it be getting taxis, driving yourself.
Yeah.
People haven't been pushing to that. And for the first time, I think the government are ahead of the curve because they're spending it now. So people eventually, with population growth, we're going to have to use that. And they're finally just not being reactive. I think they're being proactive in that regard.
Well, I'm a big Perth fan. Always have been. I mean, as I said, I lived over there many years ago, but I love the joint. Great schools, great infrastructure, lifestyle's fantastic. Weather's, from my point of view, weather's the best weather in Australia. Because you get that dry weather, which is not like we get here in Sydney, which we're suffering right at the moment. And prices you get good value for money. Yeah. And Perth people are good people. I love Perth people. And so I want to, I'll let you go, mate. You can go and maybe go and sit out in your car or something and close your eyes for half an hour. But Shane, I want to say thanks very much for making this possible. And if you're an East States listener, you should be contacting Shane, because this is the sort of way you diversify your portfolio by investing in places that what I consider to be caught up in a rising tide. And I think Perth is in a rising tide right now. I said it earlier about Canberra, but I think Perth's in a rising tide right now. And Sydney and Melbourne, they overshot, and they're probably going to take a bit of time to recover. So, Shane, thanks very much, mate.
Thanks for the opportunity, mate. Really
Sweet
appreciate
as.
it.